So on this channel, we don't really care about lighting. We do care about the views. Welcome to one of my favorite spots in LA, where I just happen to be in direct sunlight, but look behind me. That is Universal City right there. And there's no connection to my camera, which is the Minolta 7000i. Okay, so this camera came out in 1988. Okay, dating myself here. It was in my lifetime. This camera was a follow-up to the Minolta 7000. The 7000 came out, I think it was 3 years prior. And that was like a pretty revolutionary camera. It was the first autofocus camera Minolta made, and I think it might have been one of the first autofocus cameras, period. And it was like very much, a market leader. And then they came out with this one, the 7000i, which stands for intelligent, if I'm not mistaken. And it just did a bunch of extra stuff. It was really kind of leaning into this really fun, goofy technology. At the time, very cutting edge, but they had these data cards. There's like a little sleeve in here, and you can see you would get a data card and you could do a bunch of different things. I'm gonna circle back to these because they're kind of a fun talking point on their own. But this particular camera was definitely aimed at the sort of consumer, prosumer category. It was not the most expensive, not the cheapest, but very much an 80s camera, very plasticky build. You can see mine is kind of falling apart here. But there is a reason I will never get rid of this camera, and it is because it is my father's camera. Very much my dad's camera. You can see a lot of things have been taped up. Like there's something on here, I don't know what it says, but he's put black tape here. He put gaff tape on the back here. I actually had to take this tape off just to figure out what I was shooting. That was his when I opened the box. But he had this camera for years, and I do remember seeing him with this camera. He was a professional photographer in New York City, had a lot of cameras, so there were always a lot of cameras around, but I do remember this one particularly because it was like in some sort of seminal part of my life where I was really noticing him shoot professionally. And one of the things I really love about this camera is that on the back, it says, "Always stay amateur." Like, I feel like this channel was somehow dreamed up by my dad, because that is, and I've never asked him, and he now has dementia, so he wouldn't know, but I have a feeling if I asked him why he bought this camera when he had like literally the best, most cutting edge, most expensive cameras of the time, he wanted to have something that kept him grounded. And so I love this camera. A lot of backstory. Anyhow, getting back to things that are more relevant to everyone else. This camera has a top shutter speed of 4,000th of a second. So, you know, it was pretty good for its time, but like really when we talk about really cutting edge cameras, usually it's more that 1/8,000th of category, but I think that happened more in the 90s. I think that was kind of rare in the late 80s even. But again, a marker of more of an amateur level camera. It has a flash sync of 1/25th, which was up from like 1/100th of the 7000 model. And it was very much kind of, I think one of the intelligent parts of it is you can do all the things, right? Like it doesn't have a PSA-M, whatever you call that, dial on the top, but it has this mode button. So if you hit the mode button and then you use this funky little switch, so not a dial, very unusual camera language or design language, but if you hit the mode button, I don't know if you'll see this, but you can circulate between P mode, M mode, A mode, S mode, all the standards. Oh, it's not even doing it when I do that, but you can function. There we go. Okay, mode. Classic. Oh, I'm in card mode. That's why it's not doing it. Okay, card mode can only be done in program, but when I go to mode and now I circulate through, you get A, M, S, all the usual suspects. However, let's say you're shooting an aperture priority and you see something and you're like, ah, shit, I haven't had time to like adjust my, my manual, whatever settings. You just hit the P mode and it just automatically puts it in program, which is really actually super convenient because I, do tend to like to shoot in manual. And so if I'm in manual, I'm not going to freak out if like a moment happens nearby me and I have to pop into program. It's really instantaneous and super fast. And then all of a sudden you're ready to go. It's a pretty snappy camera. It has DX coding. It has, I actually don't have film in here, which is great. So I can kind of show you. Pretty basic loading. You put your film in here, you spool it here and close it and it winds. A lot of these older 80s cameras and even 90s cameras, one thing to watch out for, and this one I have a couple of these and I haven't had any issues, whereas like some of my this era Pentax cameras, particularly 90s and even 2000s, they started getting really plasticky and the parts inside break really easily. So for instance, I just got 2 more cameras in the mail that both were advertised as working but were broken because the pickup spool didn't have any sort of traction anymore. It has exposure compensation here. You can pick your metering modes. And one thing I will say is I was a little confused by some of the functions up until very recently. I had to actually go in the manual and read some of these things, but it's fairly intuitive just if you poke around. So for example, in manual exposure mode, if you were to just hit your lever here, it's just going to adjust one function. So this is adjusting my shutter speed. But if I want to switch what it's controlling, this button on the body has to be hit, and then it will go to the other function. But you have to be holding it the whole time for it to adjust the aperture. So that was a little bit surprising. Also, the direction of the aperture is left to go to stop down and right to open up, which might feel intuitive to a Nikon user, but did not feel intuitive to me. I haven't shot a lot of Nikon, but like every other body usually goes the other way. So some funny little quirky things. And then one last thing that actually took me kind of a ridiculous amount of time to realize or understand is this box here is actually controlling your focus area. It only has what I think 3 autofocus points. I wrote this down somewhere. It's real basic though. Let's see here. I'll find it. But I think it's 3 autofocus points. Pause while we have people. Okay, so like I was saying, it only has 3 autofocus points or single point. So those are kind of what you're dealing with. And that one box there, if you hold down your function, it will highlight that box. And then, probably with this light, you can't see any of this, but then you can circle through 2 options, center point or wide field. I just stick to center point. The wide field thing, like it works, but it's kind of slow. It's just 1988 technology. So single point recompose, that's how I shoot this thing. And I will say, even though the autofocus is kind of slow, it's not crazy, but it's really sticky. So it's actually surprisingly accurate and good for especially when you think about the age. So I'll just shoot off a couple frames. The other thing you'll see is if you put your lever or your switch all the way to the end, it has a beep mode, but you can put it just to the middle and then it's silent. So it's not going to beep when it confirms autofocus. I actually like the beep autofocus mode just because it gives me a little more confidence that it's latched on and I know what to expect there. There's no diopter that I can figure out or find, but the viewfinder is very big and clear. So it's a really nice viewfinder. it's a great kind of point and shoot style camera that you can make, you know, work in every other program mode, aperture priority, etc. That being said, the manual mode, you can get really fast at it, but it is just so different from any other body I've ever shot. So this action is different than like a wheel spin. And I think it's a little fiddly. I think they did sort of transition out of this design language a little bit later, and, you know, with good reason. But that being said, it's not super difficult. Autofocus and manual focus switch here gets your lenses in and out pretty nicely. And then in the viewfinder itself, you get all your information. You have what focus mode you have, you've got your shutter speed, your aperture mode, and it's really nice and bright. So you can read your information really, really nicely. Single and continuous, it goes 3 frames per second in continuous, and it takes film. So yeah, pretty straightforward. It does read DX codes from ISO 25 to 6400, and then you can actually manually override that here in this window. So in this window, you have a lot of other functionality. You have your self-timer mode, your ISO adjustment if you want to override it, your film rewind, and your card adjustment. Now, this gets into the thing that made this the I model, right? The intelligent model. So there are all these fun little cards that came with this system. They were obviously accessories you bought after the fact, but they gave you different or unlocked different functionalities of the camera. Now, for an experienced photographer, they are kind of gimmicky. Like there's a sports card, which essentially just kind of programs your camera to prioritize fast shutter speeds over aperture opening or closing down. And then there's bracket, which is, you know, actually really handy if you want to bracket your shots. There's data, which is actually pretty handy. You can record as if it was a digital camera the information of the last, I can't remember, 4 rolls of film or something like that. So you can actually get to see on the back of your camera. I'll be honest, I haven't done this yet. But I think in terms of these cards, which I have kind of regarded as a bit of a gimmick, but kind of fun, some of them do have functionality. But that one is one of the ones that has a functionality, and apparently you can recall on the camera what your settings were for each shot rather than having to set them and write them down on paper. If, for example, you're trying to learn photography and you just want to understand that relationship between your exposure triangle and see what resulted in what after you get your film developed. So actually pretty handy. Here's some more of the cards. This one is the fantasy card, which I did use, and these are some shots that kind of show you what this is doing. It's kind of, I actually link below to all of these cards and everything that they do in the show notes so that you can see. The custom card had a bunch of cool functionality to it where you could like set this up so that it wouldn't roll the film all the way. So if you develop at home, it leaves the leader out. You know, some good, nice things. Flash bracket card. One of the things Minolta was kind of slammed for, and it is one of those things that other companies have done that drive me crazy, is with this camera, they came out with a proprietary hot shoe. So it won't take just a standard flash. You do have to get a Minolta flash, but they are so cheap on the used market right now. Additionally, there are some really fantastic lenses for this system. The basic kit lens, the 50mm 1.7, I think it is, 1.7, yeah. It's a great lens. Like, it's plenty sharp. I mean, you're talking about rendering on film, and it really does the job pretty nicely. In terms of other lenses, this is one that I have and I really like. This is the 35 to 105 beer can, 3.5 to 4.5 aperture. This one is a kind of an early, I think it was slightly earlier. It has macro on it, which is really nice. So you just flip this switch and it goes into macro mode. It is what they call the beer can style of lens, and they're really famous for their 70 to 210 beer can lens. That's supposed to be like, they call it like the Leica handshake or something like that, because a secret thing was like maybe Leica made it, who knows. Probably just an urban legend, but still fun nonetheless. The point is that there are a lot of great lenses for this system that are super cheap. I got this one, and I mean, I think we are over precious with, lenses a lot of the time and get worried about having scratches. This one has scratches on the front. It has a dented filter thread. I think I got it for like 20 bucks, and it works a treat. I took 90% of the shots for this, exercise with this lens, and it performed very admirably. Additionally, I have this 100 to 300, which is actually really good. Again, I haven't used this a lot because I don't shoot a ton of this, but I don't do a ton of telephoto, but I do really like this lens. So cheap, really sharp, performed admirably as well. So lots of glass out there, which brings me to, why would you buy this camera? Because it is the ugly duckling of the film world. Minolta is a forgotten brand. No one seems to go after Minoltas at all, except for maybe the TC1. Great point and shoot, but very pricey. This camera, $10 to $20 on eBay. You can pick them up so cheap. They operate really, really well. They're solid. They deliver. The glass is great. The glass is also cheap. So it's not like picking up a really cheap Canon film body like an EOS Rebel or something, but then having to spend a lot of money on lenses. You're going to get great glass and a great body for no money. So if you're looking for like an entry point to film, this is a great one. You're not going to give a shit if it falls and breaks while you're hiking. Like, this is a great go out there, be in the world, take it to, cities you might not want your Leica in, which is a lot of places for me. I get a little freaked out carrying an expensive camera. So I love this camera. Like I said, I'm not letting go of mine. Mine obviously has sentimental value, but I actually really liked it so much when I first found it. I grabbed another one. But I am going to be selling that one. I'm going to be putting that on the store. If you don't know, I do have a store called 1 Month 2 Cameras, and I will put a link in the show notes below. I'm also going to be coming out with a video soon where I take you through my entire collection, because I've had a bit of a revelatory moment. When I started this channel just over 6 months ago, I got a little too excited and I bought so many cameras, you guys. It's just like so painful, and I'm having actual anxiety about it. So I'm going to take you with me through my entire collection, lay it out on my bed, and narrow it down to, I want to say 2 cameras. It's not going to be 2 cameras, 5 cameras. That's my goal. 5 cameras. If I can keep it under 10, I'm doing really, really well. But right now I stopped counting at 45. So that'll be my next video. Sign up and subscribe if you want to watch that. And in that video is when I will pick the next camera to be shooting for the next 2 weeks. First, I got to clean shop to see what's even left. All right. So thanks for sticking with me, and thanks for watching the video. Comment below if you've shot the 7000i, or if you have another recommendation for a good, cheap, entry-level camera. The market is crazy. Film is getting more expensive. Why spend a lot of money on it? I forgot to mention there's an absolutely fantastic, much more in-depth, I think it's like an hour-long video on this camera that I will link out below, to a gentleman who does a lot of great camera reviews. So go to his channel, subscribe to him, check it out. And we have another airplane coming, so I'm going to say goodbye, and I will see you in the next video.